I'm Chloe, and ever since I can remember, my family has treated me like an afterthought. All I could think of as a child was my younger sister Sophie, the shining star, the golden child, the person who could do no wrong. Sophie fulfilled my parents' long-held desire to have a daughter. Me? I was the bookworm, the awkward one, and the one who preferred to work out math problems to mingle at parties. I was bright and wanted to learn, but in a family that rewarded beautiful looks above intelligence, I may as well have been invisible. One day in particular, Sophie was 10 and I was 12. I had recently won a spelling bee in my area, and we were at a family BBQ. I couldn't wait to tell everyone who would listen the news. Mom, Dad, guess what? With my degree in hand, I hurried up to them. I won the spelling bee. My mom gave me a short glance before swiftly returning her focus to Sophie, who was flipping cartwheels on the grass. How lovely, my love. She blurted out, Sophie, sweetie, be careful. You might get grass stains on your new dress. I stood there, clenching the award in my hand, and watched as family members gushed over Sophie's athletic ability. Nobody inquired about my accomplishment. Nobody gave a damn. Our parents were overtly biased. Sophie received new clothes, and I got second-hand stuff. I received library cards. Sophie got dancing classes. Sophie received compliments and attention, but I, became used to being let down. The trend persisted as we got older. Sophie developed into a stunning adolescent who was lively and well-liked. I went further and deeper into my books and mathematics, seeking comfort in universes where ability was more important than charisma. In our home, the phrase, Chloe, why can't you be more like your sister, became a running joke. Sophie, darling, you're perfect just the way you are, would normally come next. I made an effort to ignore it. I convinced myself that eventually, my brilliance and diligence would be rewarded. I'd prove to them all one day that I was valuable too. I put myself into my studies with fresh zeal when I started high school. I was resolved to succeed, to produce accomplishments so noteworthy that my parents would be forced to acknowledge them. However, as things turned out, I was losing the struggle against Sophie's radiant popularity. I felt I had achieved the apex of my academic career in my junior year. I prevailed in a demanding state math competition, which pitted the sharpest brains against one another in a struggle of logic and numbers. I had a wave of joy and hope when they announced that I had won. I've done something genuinely exceptional, I thought to myself at last. That day, I ran home with the trophy in hand, excited to tell my family the good news. However, when I bounded through the door, I saw the familiar sight of my parents circling Sophie as she tried on a new costume. Mom, Dad, guess what? I exclaimed, giddy with anticipation. I won the state math competition. With a distracted smile, my mother looked up. Well, sweetie, that's nice. Sophie, please turn around, honey. Let's see the rear view of it. My father was fiddling with Sophie's outfit, and he never even looked up. Well done, Chloe. Sophie, are you certain that this size fits? It appears to be quite snug across the shoulders. I felt completely defeated as I stood there with my prize in hand. With my voice hardly audible above a whisper, I added, but it's the state competition. I beat out hundreds of other students. With barely any attention, my mother responded, That's great, sweetie. This weekend, Sophie has a major performance. We must ensure that everything is flawless. And just like that, Sophie's current project eclipsed my moment of victory once more. I went back to my room and set the trophy down on my desk, where it accumulated dust and no one else saw it but me. I put my entire being into each essay and form when it came time to apply to colleges. My aim was to secure admission to the top institution and establish my value once and for all. I'll never forget the day the admission letters came in. With a full scholarship, I had been admitted to a prominent institution to study financial analysis. As I read the letter, my fingers trembled and tears of relief and happiness streamed down my cheeks. Sophie was stretched out on the couch between my parents and me when I found them in the living room. I entered. I murmured, my voice quivering with passion. full scholarship to study financial analysis at. Oh my God. Sophie sprang from the couch and let out a sharp yell. I overlooked it. I must get a new outfit for my performance the following week. And the spotlight moved in an instant. My parents sprang up and grabbed their wallets and keys. With the acceptance letter tightly clenched in my palm, I stood in the deserted living room and watched the car pull out of the driveway. They returned late that evening, carrying suitcases brimming with Sophie's new outfit and accoutrements. My approval. It was never brought up again. Sophie's life changed as I pushed myself into my undergraduate coursework. She registered at the nearby community college, prioritizing her social life above her studies. She didn't take long to begin dating David, her love from high school. I became fully involved in the field of financial analytics, where I discovered a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction that I had never known. My brains and hard ethic were acknowledged and valued for once. I became good friends with a few people who were passionate about statistics and analysis. I finally felt like I belonged somewhere. Sophie's life was going just how our parents had always imagined it to be back home. Shortly after her college graduation, she wed David in an extravagant wedding that my parents couldn't afford. As a bridesmaid, I watched, feeling like a stranger in my own family once more. After a year of marriage, Sophie revealed she was expecting a child. You would have believed the sun rose and set in that delivery room the day she gave birth. My folks were ecstatic beyond measure. With tears in his eyes, my father said, "We're grandparents." "Shlo, is that really true? Are you not thrilled to have an aunt?" I genuinely felt pleased for Sophie. However, I couldn't help but feel stung by being passed over once more. In the light of Sophie's new parenthood, my recent employment at one of the most prominent financial businesses in the city felt inconsequential. The pattern continued when Anthony was born 2 years later. I was just Chloe, and Sophie was the ideal daughter in the perfect family. The overworked individual, the one who was never out on dates, the one without grandkids for them to swoon over. I had worked my way up to senior financial analyst by the time I was 30. I was now experiencing the sense of self-worth that had escaped me for so long. I was respected by my colleagues and sought after by clients. I decided to treat myself to a house as a way to celebrate my accomplishment. It was a lovely 4-bedroom house in a wonderful area. Although I didn't own the mansion by any means, I did own it since I paid cash for it. I had never felt a greater feeling of pride and success than I did the day I received the keys. I couldn't wait to show my family my new house. I believed that at last they would notice my accomplishments and would be pleased with me. My parents were jiggling over their grandkids when they arrived, Sophie and her children in tow. My mother's primary observation during my tour of the house was, "It's such a big house for just one person, isn't it?" My heart sank. I attempted to explain, "It's an investment, and I have room for a home office now." My father answered, "Well, I suppose that's sensible," but his tone gave the impression that he didn't find it to be at all. "Make sure Grace doesn't touch anything, Sophie, honey. We wish not to damage Aunt Chloe's belongings. It's a shame Chloe doesn't have a family to fill that big house, but I suppose her career is important to her," my mother said to Sophie as they were leaving. After moving into my new house for a few months, I was surprised to get an invitation to a family dinner. To put it mildly, I was taken aback. My family ignored me because I was weird and boring, and they frequently failed to invite me to events. Still, I agreed, thinking maybe things were getting better. With an uncomfortable shoulder touch, my father added, "Chloe, good of you to come. Take a seat. We need to talk about something crucial." I felt a knot in my gut. In our household, significant conversations typically resulted in something positive for Sophie and a bad experience for me. Nevertheless, I sat down and forced a grin. While eating supper, David's work and Sophie's children were the topics of discussion. I started to talk about a project I had recently finished successfully at work, but Anthony's unexpected cry for more cake overpowered me. My mother cleared her throat as we settled into the living room following supper. "Chloe, dear, we've been thinking." I braced myself, not knowing what to expect. She went on, sounding as though she had some sort of fatal ailment. "You're single, you have no kids, and you have that big house all to yourself." I answered hesitantly, "Yes, not like the direction things was taking." My dad jumped right in. "Well, we think it would be best if you gave your house to Sophie and her family." Thinking I had misheard, I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Give them the keys and move out," my mother explained, sounding as if she was requesting that I share the salt. "They need the space more than you do." I surveyed the crowd, expecting for someone to chuckle and declare that it was all a joke. But all I saw were grave expressions. David gave Sophie a patronizing smack on the shoulder as she sat there, looking arrogant. "You're joking, right?" At last I was able to say. My mother responded, now Chloe, in that condescending tone I was so used with. "Avoid becoming self-centered. Sophie requires more personal space than you do. After all, you're just one person." My father said, "It's your sisterly duty," as if that clarified everything. Family helps family. I had the impression that I was in a warped parallel universe. "But it's my house," I said, scarcely raising my voice above a hush. "I paid for it out of my own pocket. I put a lot of effort into it." "Oh, come on, Chloe," Sophie said, her tone sweetly sweet. "You understand the challenges of parenting 2 children in our little apartment. You would be really helpful to us." With trembling hands, I got up. "No," I shouted, raising my voice. "Certainly not. My house is not being given to you." The space erupted. My parents began enumerating all the purported sacrifices they had made for me during the years. Sophie continued talking about the challenges of being a parent. David sat there, nodding in agreement as though everything in this scenario made perfect sense. I heard my mother calling after me as I left. "Reconsider it, Chloe. Be not self-centered." The days that followed that bizarre supper were a circus of unwelcome attention in my life. My parents appeared to have extensively disseminated the word about my self-centeredness among our larger family. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly became knowledgeable about my life and inundated me with texts and calls. My great-aunt Mildred called me one day. I hadn't seen her since I was a teenager. She said, "Chloe," into the phone, "I was informed about your predicament. How could you have such cold heart? You're like an old maid, hoarding money pointlessly." My cousin Mike, with whom I was scarcely acquainted, texted me the next day. "Hey Chloe, I've heard you're having trouble. Why don't you simply relocate to a secluded island and lead a hermit lifestyle? You're a recluse and an outsider already." 2 weeks following the calamitous family meal, I was recuperating at home with a nasty cold. I was drinking hot tea and curled up on my couch with a blanket when I heard something strange coming from my front door, the audible sound of someone trying to pry open the latch. My heart started beating faster. Was there an attempt to break in? Silently, I put down my cup and slithered toward the door, my legs trembling beneath me. As I pressed my sight to the peephole, I almost let out a gasp. My parents, David, and my sister were standing on my front porch. My parents were watching Sophie, who was kneeling by the lock with a hairpin in her hand. David stood somewhat apart, appearing anxious. I pulled open the door mindlessly. All of them leaped back, their faces displaying shocked emotions. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" With a scratchy voice from being cold, I demanded, but my fury was clear. They all looked at me for a little period, looking right at me. My mother then spoke out, which really shocked me. "We assumed you would be at work. We simply intended to move in." "Move in?" I said it again, skeptical. "You mean break in and squat in my house?" "Now, Chloe," my dad said in response, "we were aware that you wouldn't have reported us to the police. After all, we're family." Glancing past them, I noticed a vehicle parked in my driveway, crammed with luggage and boxes. Actually, they were planning to move in behind my back. I said, "Get off my property," in a menacing low voice. "Now, or I will call the police." I took out my phone, phoned 911, and held it up for them to see. The last opportunity, I murmured. "Leave. Now." With a lengthy period of astonishment on their faces, they looked at me. And then, slowly, they started to back off. With trembling throughout my body, I watched them drive away. I shut the door, locked it, and sank to the floor, pressing my back against the sturdy wood. Once they were out of sight, I called a security firm the very following day and had security cameras placed all the way around my house. Not only were these cameras functional, but they also included a voice recording feature. But technology was insufficient on its own. I finally had the ideal excuse to buy the dog I'd always wanted. I made my way to the nearby animal shelter, hoping to locate a friend that could also act as a protector. That's how Max and I met. He was a big mixed-breed dog with sharp eyes and a cautious personality. The shelter employee told me his background, explaining that his former owners had abandoned him because he was very protective. I saw through his rough appearance to the devoted, caring dog that lay beneath. Max and I clicked right away. He was kind and kind at home, at my side all the time. But he turned into a watchful watchdog when visitors got close to the house, his powerful bark alerting anybody who dared to intrude. Max now has a gorgeous outdoor kennel that I furnished with an inviting doghouse and a plenty of toys. Frequently relaxing in the sun-kissed grass when he wasn't policing the boundaries, he appeared to like it. There was calm in life for 2 months. However, I had to miss a weekend's worth of work due to an emergency. Though Mrs. Davidson, my neighbor, reassured me that she would take good care of Max, I was reluctant to go. She loved him so much that when I worked late, she would frequently give him snacks and take him for walks. I felt somewhat relieved when I left. However, my phone rang on the second night of my journey. Mrs. Davidson answered, and she sounded desperate. "Chloe, my dear, there's been an incident," she uttered with trembling. Max bit a random person, pursued them down the street and out of the yard. The cops have arrived at this location. I boarded the first aircraft back, ideas racing through my head. I was greeted by a scene out of a horror movie when I got home. The automobile of my parents was parked in front of my residence. There was Sophie, looking equally arrogant and angry. I was horrified to see 2 cops waiting in my driveway. I took a cautious approach. "What's going on here?" A cop moved to the front. "We've received a report, ma'am, concerning your dog biting someone. Could you explain what transpired?" Before I could reply, Sophie interrupted. "My spouse was mauled by her monstrous dog, bit him and leaped over the fence. He could have been slain." All of a sudden, everything made sense. The bite had come from David. "That's not true," I asserted. "My dog was keeping trespassers away from my property. Should your spouse have been bitten, it was likely in an attempt to get into my home." Sophie's face took on an unattractive crimson hue. "You're lying. Set that beast down before it does harm to another person." Now my parents, who had been strangely silent, spoke out. With a sparkle in his eye, my father declared, "We'll be filing charges. You'll have to pay for David's medical bills, of course." The policeman saw the tension in the family as he glanced between us. "Ma'am, we have to send your dog to the kennel for assessment because of the complaint. He could have to be put down if he's found to be hostile." Seeing animal control load Max into their vehicle made my heart sink. Tears welled up in my eyes as he gazed at me, bewildered and heartbroken. My mother came up to me as animal control and the cops drove off. She replied, "You know, Chloe, this whole thing could have been avoided if you had just given us the house." In a low voice, "There is yet time. We'll waive the fees if you give us the house. If not, you know what happens to dogs that are aggressive." A startling insight struck me like a flash of lightning as I stood in my driveway, watching my family drive away with a smug sense of accomplishment. The cameras that monitor security. Heart thumping in my chest, I ran into the home. When I opened my laptop and saw the security video from the night before, my palms trembled. I held my breath as the video started, hoping the cameras had caught what I needed. The video was really clear. I observed Sophie and David stealthily approaching my front door while glancing over their shoulders. With a deep growl coming from his throat, Max made an appearance on screen with his hackles rising. Then Sophie's voice was crystal clear to me. "Kick the dog, David. We may accuse Chloe of biting you and demand payment, or better yet, we can acquire the entire home in return for the dog's life." I was sick to my stomach, seeing David kick Max so viciously. Startled by the unexpected assault, the dog grabbed hold of David's leg to defend itself. Sophie screamed so loudly that Max had to quickly let go of Sophie. Max was perplexed and upset as the two of them fled. I spoke steadily when I contacted my folks the next morning. "I think we need to have a serious conversation," I remarked. "Can you all come over to my house?" My mother's sickly sweet voice came on the other end of the call, after a pause. "Obviously, my darling. We'll arrive immediately." After an hour, everyone showed up, including Sophie, my parents, and David with his leg heavily wrapped. I saw the victory in their eyes as they came into my living room. They believed they had prevailed. Sophie started pointing at things as she walked around the room right away. She stated, "We'll need to get rid of this ugly lamp," in a tone that was rife with contempt. "And this couch is just not cutting it. It will be swapped out for something more suited for the family." I allowed her to carry on with her conceited tour of my house, biting my tongue. I cleared my throat at last. "I think you should watch something before we discuss anything," I murmured, maintaining my composure despite the rage building inside of me. I pointed to the big TV that was hung on the wall. "Kindly take a seat, everyone among you." Their expressions flashed confused, but they obliged, plopping down on the couch. Sophie sat on the armrest with a frustrated expression. I watched my family's color fade as the surveillance tape rolled on the screen. Their looks changed from bewilderment to outrage to terror when they realized their plan had been captured on tape. It was Sophie who broke the dumbfounded stillness first. It was just a prank," she said, fear rising in her voice. "We didn't mean any harm." David gave a forceful nod, scowling as the motion jarred his broken leg. "Yes, it was merely a prank that went too far. Is there really a need to make a big deal out of this?" Nonetheless, it appeared that my parents understood how serious the issue was. With a pale face, my father bent over. "Chloe, my love, let's not rush things. This doesn't need to be made public. We as a family can resolve this." I smiled, a stoic, unentertaining smile that made them all cringe. "It's a bit late for that, don't you think?" I looked at my watch and remarked, "And speaking of late, I believe we have some guests arriving." The knock on the door came as if right out of nowhere. I had phoned the police earlier that morning, and when I opened it, I saw two of them. As I ushered them in, I said, "Perfect timing. Officers, I have evidence of an attempted break-in and a malicious attempt at blackmail." There was a frenzy of action after that. I gave the cops an explanation of the issue and showed them the disturbing security footage. After giving a somber listening, they proceeded to arrest Sophie and David. My parents sobbed as the cops told them their rights. My mother cried, "Chloe, please, don't do this, we're family." I had a brief moment of despair, but it was swiftly eclipsed by years of anger and bitterness that had been harbored. "You should have thought of that before you tried to steal my home and hurt my dog," I remarked harshly. "I think it's time for you to leave." Tearfully, they walked away, trailing after Sophie and David as they were led to the police vehicle. I went to the animal shelter to bring Max home that evening, feeling as though a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. His tail was wagging wildly as he showered my face with kisses, clearly thrilled to see me. I gave him a strong embrace and muttered, "Let's head home, buddy." The weeks that followed flew by. David and Sophie were detained and put on trial. Using the unambiguous footage from my security cameras, they were determined to have tried both extortion and breaking and entering. They were given suspended sentences and a heavy fine, which I was rewarded. I decided to break up all contact with my close family members. Still, I thought it crucial that the rest of the family be made aware of the reality. I forwarded copies of the surveillance footage and a thorough report of what had happened to all of our family. The outpouring of support was tremendous. Once critical of my self-centeredness, aunts, uncles, and cousins now offered words of support and contrition. Sophie, David, and my parents were shunned at family get-togethers. Not even the most understanding relatives could forgive them for what they had done. For my part, things started to get better. I kept getting better at what I did, and I was happier than ever at what I did. Max and I created a cozy routine and took pleasure in taking lengthy walks in the neighborhood park. I got to know Greg, a generous software developer with a golden retriever named Luna, on one of these walks. We bonded over our mutual love of dogs and our shared experiences growing up in challenging homes right away. After exchanging numbers, we started dating, and every day that went by, our connection became stronger.
Hi, I'm Emily. Growing up, my life was like being a shadow in a brightly lit room. Always there, but rarely noticed. You see, my younger brother Jake was the golden child. Our parents gave him everything he wanted, while I had to fight for every small achievement. When I was about 8, I remember one Christmas morning when Jake threw a tantrum because I got a new bike. It was secondhand, but it was new to me. Before the day was over, my parents rushed out to buy him a brand new one just to stop his crying. That was my normal. Things didn't improve as we got older. High school was a mix of me getting good grades and Jake barely passing, with our parents praising his mediocre efforts as if he'd won academic awards. "Emily, why can't you be more supportive of your brother? He needs us more," my mom would say. It was always about what Jake needed. By the time I was 18, I had enough. I packed my bags and moved out, finding a job at a local garage sweeping floors and doing oil changes. The owner, a gruff old guy named Bill, saw something in me. "You've got a knack for this," he told me one day, handing me a wrench. That was the start of my education in auto repair. Over the next 7 years, I worked my way up from that dusty floor to becoming Bill's top mechanic. I saved every dime I could, working nights and weekends at the garage. When Bill decided to retire, I was ready. With the money I'd saved and a small loan, I bought the shop. At 25, I became the owner of my own business, Emily's Auto Clinic. The place wasn't much at first, just a couple of old lifts and a waiting area that smelled like motor oil and coffee, but it was mine. I worked hard, revamped the shop, hired a few good people, and soon we were known as the best in town. My success, though, seemed to only deepen the divide back home. My parents, still doting on an increasingly aimless Jake, viewed my independence as a challenge rather than an achievement. I heard through the grapevine, thanks to Aunt Linda, who couldn't keep a secret if it was super glued to her lips, that they were baffled at how I did it all on my own. "Emily's just lucky, I guess," my dad would say, his voice tinged with disbelief, but luck had nothing to do with it. It was all those nights under the hoods of cars. Every weekend spent learning about engines and electrical systems, while Jake partied and squandered the college fund our parents had scraped together. Yet despite all this, there's still a part of me that loves them. It's why, when they showed up at my shop that day with Jake in tow, my heart didn't just sink, it shattered. "Emily, we need to talk," my dad said as they walked into my shop unannounced, Jake trailing behind them like he owned the place. "Sure, what's up?" I asked, sensing something was off. Dad cleared his throat, glancing at Jake before speaking. "Well, Emily, we've been talking, and we think it's time Jake took over the business here." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Come again." "Yeah, Emily, I'm ready to run things now. You can stay and work the floor, but I'll handle the business side of things," Jake said, his tone casual as if this was the most natural thing in the world. The room seemed to spin for a moment. "You're serious?" I stared at them, my heart pounding in disbelief. Mom chimed in, her voice soft but firm. "It's for the best, honey. You know how hard it's been for Jake since he dropped out. This could really turn things around for him." "But this is my business. I built it from scratch," I protested, my voice rising. Dad's tone was stern. "And it's time you thought about family, Emily. Jake needs this more than you do now." "Needs it? I earned this. Why should I just hand it over?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jake sneered, "Because I'm the one who should have been doing this all along." You just got lucky, sis. Lucky. Do you even hear yourself? I was shouting now, anger flaring. I worked day and night to build this place. You never even liked mechanics. Mom tried to soothe the situation. We know you've worked hard, Emily, but Jake is your brother. Helping him is the right thing to do. Help by giving away my business. How is that fair? Dad was losing patience. Life isn't always about what's fair, Emily. It's about family. This is my livelihood. You're asking me to just step aside for him. What about what I want? What about what I've worked for? Jake scoffed. Come on, Emily. It's not like you can't find another job. Let me have this. That's enough. This is my shop, and I'm not handing it over to anyone, especially not under these ridiculous circumstances. Mom looked at me with disappointment. I thought you cared about your family, Ellie. I do care, but this isn't caring. This is taking advantage. The tension in the air was thick. Each word from them felt like a betrayal. You need to leave now. Dad shook his head as they turned to go. Emily, you're making a big mistake. As the door slammed behind them, my breaths were heavy, a mix of rage and heartbreak. They came here to strip me of everything I had worked for under the guise of family support. This was the moment I knew things would never be the same again. Crash. The sound of breaking glass jolted me out of my paperwork. I rushed to my office door just in time to see Jake climbing through the broken window, his face twisted in determination. What the hell are you doing, Jake? My voice was a mix of shock and anger. He brushed off his jeans nonchalantly. Dad said you agreed to let me take over today. Figured I'd start early. Agreed? Are you insane? I never agreed to anything. I couldn't believe the audacity. Jake smirked, moving past me to sit at my desk. Come on, Emily. Dad said you'd see sense. It's time for me to run things. This is breaking and entering, Jake. Get out now, or I'm calling the cops. My hand hovered over my phone. He shrugged, clearly unbothered. Go ahead. Dad will just bail me out. You really think I'll take your side over family? Family? Is that what you call this? My anger boiled over as I dialed 911. I reported the break-in while Jake watched, his smirk never fading. The police arrived within minutes. An officer stepped into my office, assessing the situation. Jake, you need to leave now, or you'll be arrested for trespassing, he warned. Jake stood up, defiant. She's my sister. She's making a big deal out of nothing. I shook my head, my resolve hardening. I want him arrested. He broke into my office and refuses to leave. The officer nodded and cuffed Jake. Once the police had taken Jake away, I sat in the quiet of my vandalized office, the broken window a stark reminder of the day's events. The next morning, I applied for a restraining order. As I sat in the courthouse filling out the forms, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. This was the final break. My family's entitlement had pushed me to this point, and there was no turning back. The restraining order was granted without issue, and the judge's stern look as he handed it to me seemed to convey an understanding beyond what he could put into words. Leaving the courthouse, the weight of the day settled over me. This wasn't just about a broken window or a disrupted office. It was about breaking free from a lifetime of being undermined and undervalued. That night, I secured the broken window as best I could and made plans for a new security system. The reality of my situation was clear. If Jake and my parents were willing to go this far, who knew what they'd try next? But one thing was certain. I was not going to let them destroy what I had built. As I locked up the shop, I looked around at the tools and cars, each one a testament to my hard work and dedication. This was my place, my achievement. No amount of familial manipulation could take that from me. It was time to move forward, to build even bigger, and to prove that I was more than they ever gave me credit for. The shop was quiet, the only sounds being the distant hum of the city and the occasional clank of metal cooling in the night air. In that moment, I knew I had made the right decision. The days following Jake's arrest and my filing for a restraining order were a whirlwind of gossip and mixed reactions. Walking into the local diner, I could feel eyes on me, whispers trailing in my wake. Some of the townspeople sided with my family, their glances cold and judgmental. Emily, how could you do that to your own brother? Mrs. Thompson, a longtime family friend, asked, her disappointment palpable. I sighed, my patience wearing thin. He broke into my shop, Mrs. Thompson. I had to protect my business. Others, however, admired my resolve. Mike, a fellow business owner, clapped me on the back as I left the diner. You did what you had to, Emily. Can't let family push you around if it's bad for business. Grateful for the support, I focused on the path ahead. The incident with Jake had exposed vulnerabilities in my business that I couldn't ignore. It was clear I needed to fortify my shop, both legally and financially, to prevent any future claims or disruptions. I spent the next few weeks meeting with lawyers and financial advisors, tightening up every loose end. Emily, it's essential you have clear legal documentation about the ownership and operations of your shop. My lawyer, Mr. Carlson, advised during one of our sessions. We drafted several documents that solidified my sole ownership and laid out explicit protocols for business operations and succession. Meanwhile, I also worked on a strategic plan for expansion. I had always envisioned opening a second location, and now seemed like the perfect time to move forward. Researching potential spots, I drove around neighboring towns, scouting locations that offered growth opportunities. One promising area had a high demand for auto repairs, but few service providers. I negotiated a lease for a suitable space, envisioning a new branch of Emily's Auto Clinic that could serve a broader community. Back at the shop, I held meetings with my team, keeping them updated and involved. We're expanding, I announced one afternoon, a buzz of excitement filling the room. And I want all of you to be a part of this journey. We're not just a team, we're a family, the kind that supports each other. This period of reaffirmation and growth was busy but fulfilling. As I implemented the new security systems and reinforced our practices, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. My evenings were spent reviewing business plans and preparing for the opening of the new location. Every step I took was a testament to my dedication to my craft and my independence. It wasn't just about proving my family wrong anymore. It was about building the life I deserved. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above any challenge. As the dust settled from the upheaval with my family, I turned my focus outward, forging a path that was wholly my own. The community's response was mixed, but over time, those who supported my decision to stand firm against my family's entitlement began to rally around me, forming a new chosen family. The centerpiece of this new chapter was Mia, a young woman fresh out of vocational school, hungry for an opportunity to prove herself in the world of auto mechanics, a world still dominated by men. When she first walked into my shop, her situation mirrored the early days of my own career. I've knocked on every door in town, Emily, Mia admitted during her interview, her eyes determined yet anxious. Yours is the last shop on my list. I saw a younger version of myself in her, the same drive, the same need to prove that talent isn't gendered. You're hired, I said without a second thought. But I'm warning you, it's tough here, and I run a tight ship. Mia grinned, the relief evident on her face. I wouldn't have it any other way. Mentoring Mia was as much a learning experience for me as it was for her. As I taught her the intricacies of diagnostics and repair, she reminded me of the power of resilience and the importance of giving someone a chance. The chance I once craved and fought for. Together, we tackled complex repairs and overhauled engines. Her presence brought a new energy to the shop, and her quick learning and dedication quickly earned her the respect of the rest of the crew. It wasn't long before customers were asking for her by name. Seeing you handle that wrench, it's clear you were meant for this, I told her one afternoon, a smile playing on my lips as we worked on a particularly stubborn old truck. Mia wiped the sweat from her brow, returning the smile. Couldn't have done it without a great teacher. The culmination of our hard work and community support came to fruition with the grand opening of the second location of Emily's Auto Clinic. To celebrate, I organized a community event inviting local businesses, customers, and friends to join us for a day of celebration. The event was a hit, a carnival of sorts with food stalls, music, and free vehicle checkups. Children darted between stands, their laughter mingling with the chatter of the crowd. It was more than a promotional event, it was a testament to the community that had embraced me and the business I had built from the ground up. As I stood back and watched the festivities, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey. My parents and Jake were nowhere in sight, their absence a stark contrast to the full, vibrant scene before me. They had chosen their path, one that led them away from this success and happiness. In their place, I had found a richer connection with those around me, proving that family isn't always defined by blood. It's defined by the support, respect, and love you find along the way. Here's to new beginnings, I toasted with Mia, raising my glass to the bustling crowd, to the thriving business, and to the endless possibilities that lay ahead. As the sun set behind us, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, the lights from the event cast a warm glow over everything. This was more than my recovery, it was a rebirth. That's the end of my story. Now here's a question for you all. Do you think Emily was right to stand her ground against her family's demands, even though it led to estrangement? Or should she have found a compromise to maintain family unity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience and triumph. Thank you for watching. Hi, I'm John. I greeted as the autumn sun filtered through the towering oaks, casting dappled shadows across our sprawling family estate. The air buzzed with the lively chatter of relatives, and the warm breeze carried the mouth-watering aroma of roasting meat and freshly baked pie. It was the day of our annual family reunion. Beside me stood my wife, Anna, radiant and heavily pregnant, mingling gracefully with the crowd as we welcomed cousins, uncles, and aunts arriving in waves. "Honey, isn't it wonderful to have everyone here?" Anna squeezed my hand, her eyes scanning the crowd. "It is," I replied with a smile, "but stick close. You know how Mom can be," I whispered, nodding toward my mother, Helen, as she navigated through the crowd with sharp eyes, always assessing. As the day wore on, the initial small talk gave way to deeper conversations. My ever-cheerful sister-in-law, Julia, joined us by the edge of the garden, her presence offering a welcome buffer against Mom's increasingly watchful gaze. "So John, that new case you're working on sounds intense, huh?" Julia's attempt to steer the conversation elsewhere was transparent but appreciated. "Yeah, it's complex," I replied with a laugh, "but nothing compared to managing family dynamics." As my gaze drifted back to Mom, standing with a group of my aunts, her sharp eyes occasionally flickered in our direction. Anna noticed too, her expression tightening. "I wish she'd just come out and say what's on her mind," Anna muttered. "This silent judgment is exhausting." "She thinks she knows what's best," I sighed, though the truth weighed heavy on me. The sun began to sink lower as everyone gathered around the long table set up on the lawn for dinner. The clinking of silverware mixed with the murmur of conversation, and glasses were raised in toasts. It was picturesque, almost perfect, until Mom sat directly across from us. "John, I hope you've been making time for Anna, despite your busy schedule," Helen remarked, her voice carrying an edge that caused a few nearby relatives to pause mid-bite. "Mom, Anna's doing great," I assured her, placing my hand over Anna's. "Yes, Helen, I'm quite capable of taking care of myself. But thank you for your concern," Anna responded, her tone polite yet firm. Helen's lips tightened, her fork hovering in midair. "Well, with the baby coming, you can't be too careful. I was just reading an article the other day about how important it is for expectant mothers to avoid stress." "Really, Helen, I'm fine," Anna replied, her voice calm but resolute. "John's been wonderful, and Julia has been such a great help." Julia, catching the cue, chimed in with a bright smile. "Absolutely, and wait until you see the nursery we've been setting up. John, why don't you show your mom the photos?" As dinner wore on, Helen's comments grew more pointed, veiled criticisms aimed at Anna's diet and her decision to continue working late into her pregnancy. The tension at the table thickened, with relatives exchanging uncomfortable glances. Finally, I stood, raising my glass. "I'd like to propose a toast to family, both by blood and by bond. May we always support and uplift each other, no matter what." The glasses raised in agreement, and for a moment the air lightened. But Helen's tight smile as she sipped her wine hinted that the evening's peace was fleeting. As night descended and dessert was served, the warmth of the reunion cooled under a lingering shadow of unease. The earlier laughter and stories faded, replaced by tense shuffling as we moved inside for dessert. "Anna, wait until you try the lemon tart. Julia's been raving about it all day," Aunt Margie said, her cheerful tone cutting through the stiffness. "I'm sure it's wonderful," Anna replied, her arm linked with Julia's as they ascended the staircase together. But behind them, Helen's eyes narrowed, mistaking Julia for Anna due to their similar dresses. Her steps quickened, driven by a dangerous mix of resentment and misguided protectiveness. "I need to speak with you, now, Anna." Helen's voice, sharp with urgency, pierced the air, but it was Julia who turned. "Helen, I thank you," Julia began, but there was no time for explanations. In a swift, impulsive movement, Helen pushed her, sending Julia tumbling down the stairs. The sound of her fall was a terrifying symphony of gasps and a heavy thud. Julia! Anna screamed, rushing down the stairs as the family recoiled in shock. Helen stood frozen at the top, her face pale as the gravity of her mistake sank in. I pushed through the crowd, my legal instincts kicking in through the personal horror. Call an ambulance. Now, my voice cut through the chaos as I knelt beside Julia, assessing her injuries. Why would you do this, Helen? Anna's voice trembled with a mix of fury and fear. She's your niece. Helen's hands fluttered helplessly, her voice stammering. I thought she was you. I just wanted to talk. By pushing her down the stairs. My voice was cold, my eyes searching hers for some explanation that made sense. As Julia was rushed away on a stretcher, moments later, the house fell into a somber silence. John took Helen aside, his voice tight with a mix of disbelief and authority. What's going on, Mom? Your behavior tonight wasn't just out of line. It was dangerous. What did you think Anna was going to do? Helen wrung her hands, her voice a shaky whisper. It's all those articles and talk shows. They say some women trick men, trap them with pregnancies. I thought she was manipulating you. John blinked in disbelief. Manipulating? Anna, she's my wife, Mom, and we're having this baby together. How could you believe something like that about her? I got scared, Helen muttered, her eyes downcast. Seeing her, or who I thought was her, it all just came rushing back. John ran a hand through his hair, struggling to reconcile the protective mother he had known with the woman who now stood before him, consumed by irrational fears. Anna needs me. Julia needs justice. We're going to deal with this, but right now, I can't even look at you. He turned away from his mother and walked back to Anna, who stood by the door with red, swollen eyes. As they awaited word on Julia's condition, John's resolve hardened. The night air, thick with unspoken words, mirrored the family's shattered trust. The festive atmosphere of the reunion had dissolved, replaced by the grim reality of the consequences of a misunderstanding that nearly cost a life. At the hospital, the sterile hum of fluorescent lights echoed in the narrow corridor as John paced outside Julia's room. Inside, Anna sat by her sister's bedside, holding her hand as the quiet beeping of medical monitors filled the room. The weight of the night's events pressed heavily on John's mind as he considered the next steps. Returning from the security office, John held a USB drive in his hand, the small device loaded with undeniable evidence. I've got the CCTV footage from the house, he said, his voice low but steady. It's clear. Helen saw Julia, mistook her for you, and pushed her, no hesitation. Anna's voice trembled. Why would she do this, John? It doesn't make any sense. It was deliberate, Anna, he replied. She really thought she was pushing you. It's twisted, but it's right there, in black and white. Just then, Dr. Simmons entered the room, his expression serious. Julia is stable, but she has a concussion and a broken leg. She's going to have a long recovery. John nodded, his voice calm but firm. Thank you, doctor. Can we have a moment? The doctor exited the room quietly, leaving them alone. John turned to Anna. There's something you need to see. It's not easy, but I think you should know how far this went. Together, they watched the footage on John's laptop, the grainy black and white images revealing the horrifying truth of Julia's fall. Anna gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. Oh God, John, she really thought she was pushing me. John took her hand, his voice steady but filled with conviction. I've been thinking, we can't let this go. Julia deserves justice, and we need to protect you and our baby. Anna looked up at him, her voice shaking. What are you saying? I'm saying that my mother needs to face the consequences. I'm going to press charges. But she's your mother, John. Can we really go through with this? John's gaze was firm. If we don't, then what? She nearly killed Julia. What if next time it's you, or our child? Anna nodded slowly, her own resolve strengthening. You're right, it's just hard. I know, John said softly, squeezing her hand. But it's necessary, for all of us. Leaving the room, John made some calls, reaching out to the family attorney and laying out the situation. His voice was resolute. Yes, I understand the ramifications, but I can't let this slide. She has to be held accountable. Back in the hospital room, Anna's phone buzzed with a text from her brother-in-law, Michael, who had just heard about the incident. "Is it true what happened? Is Julia okay?" Anna quickly replied, explaining the situation and John's decision. Michael's response was immediate. "You have our full support. This is unimaginable, but it's necessary." John returned to the room, placing a reassuring hand on Anna's shoulder. "The lawyer is on board," he said quietly, his voice firm but comforting. In the days that followed, preparations began to move forward with legal proceedings. "We'll start as soon as Julia is able to give her statement," John said to Anna. The next few days blurred with legal discussions and tense family meetings. Relatives divided, some in disbelief at Helen's actions, while others condemned her outright. John found himself distanced from many people he had once been close to, the rifts caused by his stance seeming too deep to ever fully heal. One evening, as John and Anna sat quietly in the hospital cafeteria, Anna reached for his hand. "No matter what happens, we're in this together, right?" "Right. Together," John replied, his voice steady, his grip firm. As they returned to Julia's room, John glanced between his wife and his sister-in-law. He steeled himself for the fight ahead. The truth was unraveling, exposing the cracks in a family that had once seemed unbreakable. The courtroom was tense, the only sounds being the shuffle of papers and the occasional murmur. Helen sat stiffly beside her lawyer, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Across the room, John stood with Anna, bracing himself to watch his mother face justice. The judge entered the room, and a reverent hush fell over the crowd. "This court is now in session," his voice boomed, echoing through the chambers. The prosecutor stood, her voice clear and resolute. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here to address a grave act of violence, one that could have ended in tragedy. We will show that Helen acted not out of confusion, but out of malice, endangering the life of her niece, Julia, whom she believed to be her daughter-in-law, Anna." Helen's lawyer rose in response, his tone calm and measured. "We acknowledge the severity of the situation. However, we argue that this was a misunderstanding fueled by concern, not an intent to harm." As the trial unfolded, witnesses recounted the events of that fateful night. Anna took the stand, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I never imagined we would end up here, facing such a heartbreaking family rift. Julia was mistaken for me, and it wasn't an accident. It was intentional." Then came the pivotal moment, the presentation of the CCTV footage. The prosecutor played the video, the images stark and undeniable. The footage showed Helen pushing Julia, and a collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. John watched the screen, torn between his roles as son and attorney, each frame of the video feeling like a personal blow. When John was called to testify, he spoke of his mother's growing resentment and paranoia. "It pains me deeply, but I must stand for what is just. My mother's actions were deliberate and dangerous." In her defense, Helen finally spoke, her voice trembling. "I thought I was protecting my son. I believed there was a threat to his future, to our family's honor. I'm sorry, truly sorry, but it was a mistake." The jury didn't deliberate long. The evidence was overwhelming. Soon, the judge was reading the verdict. Based on the evidence presented, the jury finds the defendant, Helen, guilty of aggravated assault. The judge announced Helen's sentence: years of probation and a restraining order to protect Anna and her unborn child. The finality of the judgment echoed through the courtroom, settling like a weight on everyone present. After the trial, as the crowds dispersed, John and Anna stood together outside, the tension of the past weeks lifting slightly. Anna looked up at John, her eyes a mix of sorrow and relief. "It's over, but how do we move on from this?" John took her hand, his voice resolute. "We rebuild. Together. We focus on our future, on our family. We make sure our child grows up in love, not resentment." Their commitment to each other and their future child was unshaken, even as they navigated the aftermath of a family fractured by fear and misunderstanding. And that concludes their story. It's been a long, difficult journey, but it leaves us with a question. If you were in John's position, would you press charges against a family member to uphold justice, or would you find another way to resolve the situation in order to preserve family bonds? It's a tough call, one that balances moral duty and family loyalty. What would you do? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Hey there, I'm Linda. Before I dive into this crazy story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss this wild ride. I'm a 35-year-old single mom working my butt off as a nurse while raising my sweet little girl, Harper. We live in a quiet suburb that looks like something out of a Hallmark movie, but trust me, appearances can be deceiving. Harper, sweetie, have you seen my scrubs? I called out as I rummaged through a pile of laundry. They're in the dryer, Mommy. Harper shouted back from her room, probably lost in another coloring book. I swear, this kid has a better memory than I do. Must be nice not having to juggle a million things at once. I've got this sister, Emma, who's been my rock ever since Harper's dad decided fatherhood wasn't his style and bailed. Emma's always there to help out when my shifts run late. Hey sis, any chance you can watch Harper tonight? Got stuck with a double, I asked, the phone wedged between my ear and shoulder as I folded laundry. Of course, Linda, you know I love having my little niece over, Emma replied, her voice warm. Then there's Mark, Emma's husband. At first I thought he was a stand-up guy, always offering to help out. But lately something's been off. I can't put my finger on it, but my nurse's intuition is tingling. Thanks for dinner, Mark. You really didn't have to, I said one evening as he dropped off a casserole. No problem, Linda. What's family for, right? Mark responded with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. And don't get me started on their twins, Jake and Zoe, 6 years old and already acting like they own the world. Last time they were over, Harper's favorite doll mysteriously lost all its hair. Barbie needed a haircut, Mommy, Harper explained tearfully. I swear those kids are going to be a handful when they hit their teens. How about a barbecue this weekend? I suggested during our weekly sister catch-up call. At that park Harper loves with the big playground. Sounds perfect, Emma exclaimed. I'll bring the salads, you handle the grill. Deal, I agreed, already picturing Harper's excited face when I told her. As I hung up with Emma, Harper bounced into the room, pigtails flying. Mommy, can we go to the park tomorrow? Pretty please. I scooped her up, grinning. Even better, sweetie. We're having a big family barbecue there this weekend. Harper's eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. Really? With Aunt Emma and Uncle Mark and everybody? You bet, I said, pushing down that nagging feeling about Mark. It was probably nothing, right? Just family being family. The day of the barbecue started off perfect, sun shining, burgers sizzling, and Harper's laughter ringing out from the swings. I was chatting with Emma, one eye always on my little girl. So how's work been? Emma asked, sipping her lemonade. Crazy as usual, but hey, that's the ER for you, I replied, flipping a burger. That's when Mark finally showed up, Jake and Zoe in tow. Those two made a beeline for the swings like they were on a mission. Uncle Mark, watch me swing high, Harper called out, all smiles. I saw Mark approach the swings, his face unreadable. Time to share, Harper, he said, his voice oddly flat. Sweet kid that she is, Harper nodded. Okay, just one more minute, please. What happened next still plays in slow motion in my mind. Mark's hand shot out, shoving Harper hard. She flew off the swing, hit the ground with a sickening thud, and let out a scream that made my blood run cold. Harper, I shouted, sprinting over. My baby was curled up, clutching her arm, tears streaming down her face. I rounded on Mark, fury bubbling up. What the hell, Mark? He held up his hands, all innocence. Whoa, calm down, Linda. She must have let go by accident. I saw you push her, I spat, cradling Harper. Emma rushed over, looking torn. Mark, what happened? It was an accident, he insisted, but his eyes were shifty. Meanwhile, Jake and Zoe had already claimed the swings, laughing like nothing had happened. My arm hurts, Mommy, Harper whimpered, and my heart shattered. We're going to the hospital, I announced, scooping her up. Emma touched my arm. Linda, I'm sure Mark didn't mean. I jerked away. Not now, Emma. I need to take care of my daughter. As I carried Harper to the car, I heard Mark behind me. Come on, it's not that bad. Kids fall all the time. I whirled around, Harper still in my arms. Stay the hell away from us, Mark. I mean it. The drive to the ER was a blur of Harper's soft cries and my own racing thoughts. How could Mark do this? How could he hurt my baby girl? In the waiting room, Harper curled up in my lap, sniffling. Why did Uncle Mark push me, Mommy? I stroked her hair, fighting back tears. I don't know, baby, but I promise he won't ever hurt you again. My phone buzzed with texts from Emma. Linda, please call me. Mark says it was an accident. Are you guys okay? I ignored them all. Right now, Harper was all that mattered. A nurse called us in, and I recognized her for my shifts. Linda, what happened? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. My brother-in-law pushed her off a swing. The nurse's eyes widened, and she shot me a look that said, "We'll talk later." As they examined Harper's arm, took x-rays, and eventually put on a cast, my mind was racing. How had I missed this side of Mark? What else had he done that I didn't know about? One thing was crystal clear. I couldn't trust him anymore. And Emma? Well, she'd have to choose her husband or her family. Walking out of the ER, Harper's good arm around my neck, I made a silent vow. No one, and I mean no one, would ever hurt my baby again. Mark had no idea what he just started. But he was about to find out. Mama Bear was awake, and she was out for blood. The weeks after the swing incident were a blur of anger and sleepless nights. I couldn't shake the image of Mark pushing Harper, couldn't unhear her cry of pain. It was like a switch had flipped in my brain, and suddenly, I was seeing Mark in a whole new light. It started when I overheard Harper talking to her cousin on the phone. Yeah, Uncle Mark is mean sometimes. He yelled at me for touching his stuff once, and he always makes me give Jake and Zoe my toys. My blood ran cold. How long had this been going on? The next day at the playground, I casually brought up Mark to some of the other parents. Oh, that guy. Yeah, he's got a temper, one mom said, lowering her voice. Saw him screaming at some kids for playing too close to his car once. Another dad chimed in. He threatened to sue me when our kids got into a scuffle over a freaking juice box. Can you believe it? The more I dug, the worse it got. Mark had a reputation all right, and it wasn't pretty, bullying kids, intimidating parents. He was like a ticking time bomb in khakis and a polo shirt. Then I found out about his job. I ran into his old coworker at the grocery store. Mark? Oh yeah, he got fired for throwing a stapler at the intern. Nasty business. Didn't he tell you? No, he sure as hell didn't, and neither did Emma. Speaking of Emma, she showed up at my door one night looking like she hadn't slept in days. Linda, I don't know what to do, she sobbed. Mark's been different, angry all the time, lying about where he's been. I found receipts for jewelry I've never seen. I think he might be cheating. I held her as she cried, my mind racing. This was bigger than I thought. That's when I decided to go full detective mode. I installed a nanny cam in Harper's room, disguised as a teddy bear. Call me paranoid, but I had to know what was happening when I wasn't around. The next family dinner, I left it running. What I saw when I played back the footage made me want to puke. Mark sneaking into Harper's room while everyone was downstairs. He went straight for her piggy bank, pocketing a handful of bills. My 7-year-old's hard-earned allowance stolen by a grown-ass man. That son of a... I muttered, watching the video for the third time. It was clear now, the swing wasn't an isolated incident. Mark was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and he'd been fooling us all for years. I paced my living room, mind whirling. This wasn't just about protecting Harper anymore. Jake and Zoe were in danger too, not to mention Emma. Hell, the whole neighborhood needed to know what kind of monster was living among us. But Mark was smart, careful. He'd deny everything, maybe even try to turn it all back on me. I needed proof, something so damning he couldn't wiggle his way out of it. That's when it hit me, the family reunion next month. Everyone would be there, the perfect stage for Mark's grand unmasking. I grabbed my phone, fingers flying over the keys as I started making plans. Hidden cameras, strategic conversations, maybe even a few planted situations to trigger Mark's temper. You messed with the wrong mama bear, Mark, I muttered, a grim smile spreading across my face. It was time to show everyone who he really was. As I worked late into the night, plotting Mark's downfall, one thought kept me going. No one hurts my family and gets away with it. No one. The day of the family reunion arrived, and let me tell you, I was wound tighter than a clock spring. Weeks of planning were all coming down to this. I'd set up hidden cameras all over the park, disguised as everything from birdhouses to fake rocks. The playground was wired like a reality TV set. I'd invited every parent and kid who'd ever had a run-in with Mark, promising them the chance to see justice served. They were scattered around, playing their parts perfectly. Emma arrived with Mark and the twins, looking stressed. I gave her a reassuring nod. She knew something was up, but not the details. Plausible deniability and all that. Great turnout, Linda, Mark said, eyeing the crowd. Didn't realize we had such a big family. Oh, you'd be surprised who's considered family these days, I replied, sweet as poison. The trap was set, now to spring it. First, I had little Timmy, whose bike Mark had once run over, accidentally spilled juice on Mark's shoes. You little brat, Mark snarled, grabbing Timmy's arm. Do you know how much these cost? I saw phones coming out, people pretending to take selfies while actually recording. Next came Mrs. Johnson, whose dog Mark had threatened to have put down for barking. She let her poodle off the leash, and it made a beeline for Mark's leg. Get this mutt away from me, Mark yelled, trying to kick the dog. More phones, more candid shots. The final straw was when I had Jake and Zoe's classmate Billy start a water gun fight near Mark's precious car. Mark lost it. He charged at the kids, face red with rage. I'll sue every last one of you little shits if there's so much as a water spot on my car. That's when I made my move. I hit send on my phone, and suddenly, everyone's devices lit up with a live stream from the hidden cameras. Every nasty word, every aggressive move played out in high definition. Emma gasped, staring at her screen in horror. Mark, what is this? Mark spun around, realizing too late he was surrounded. His eyes landed on me, and I saw the moment he knew he was screwed. You set me up, he growled, advancing toward me. I stood my ground. No, Mark. You did this all yourself. I just made sure everyone could see the real you. Emma stepped between us, tears in her eyes. Is this true? All of it? The bullying, the lies, stealing from Harper. Mark's face twisted. They're all exaggerating. You're going to believe them over your own husband. But the evidence was right there, undeniable. Parents started chiming in with their own stories, kids pointing and whispering. Mark, cornered, did what any bully does when exposed. He lashed out. He lunged at me, but in his rage, he misjudged. His foot caught on a raised bit of playground safety mat, and suddenly he was airborne. Time seemed to slow as Mark flailed, tumbling off the edge of the play structure. There was a sickening crunch as he landed, followed by a howl of pain. My arm. I think it's broken, Mark wailed, clutching his limb. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Same park, same injury he caused Harper. Karma's a bitch, isn't it? As we waited for the ambulance, Emma knelt beside me, her face a mix of grief and resolve. I'm so sorry, Linda. I should have seen it sooner. I squeezed her hand. We both should have. But it's over now. Harper tugged at my sleeve, her eyes wide. Is Uncle Mark going away, Mommy? I scooped her up, holding her close. Yeah, baby, he's going away for a long time. Looking around at the community united against Mark's bullying, at Emma's tear-stained but determined face, at Harper safe in my arms, I felt a weight lift. It was over. We were safe. As the ambulance pulled away, Mark's curses fading into the distance, I turned to the gathered crowd. So who's up for some barbecue? I'd say we've got a lot to celebrate. The story's over, folks. Now I've got a question for you. If you were Emma, would you have stood by Mark after seeing his true colors? Or would you have sided with your sister, Linda, immediately? Think about family loyalty versus doing what's right. Drop your thoughts in the comments below.